When you first get into anime, you'll inevitably find yourself on the internet asking the question, what is the best anime of all time? And one title that almost always pops up is Steins Gate. And for a lot of people, it's their gateway into the world of anime, in a time when everything still feels fresh, exciting, and full of potential. Which got me thinking, is that why Steins Gate is so highly regarded? Or is it genuinely that good? That question led me down another rabbit hole because Steins Gate is part of a larger franchise known as the Science Adventure series, a collection of shows all following the signature word naming convention. But how come the rest of these series aren't nearly as popular? Well, I'm no mad scientist, but I've watched about 600 anime according to AniList before I recently sat down to watch Steins Gate, so who better to answer my own questions than me? And after exploring all the Science Adventure series, what I found was shocking. Well, not really, but there might be something a little bit interesting here. While you don't need any knowledge of any specific entry to enjoy most of the series, they all share a common DNA, some reoccurring tropes and themes executed to varying degrees of success. So, if you'll allow me, let's dive into all of that. Steins Gate, like pretty much all the Science Adventure series, kicks off with some flowery prose that hints that it's been adapted from a visual novel. I didn't mention it yet, but yes, actually all of these entries except for one come from visual novels. So what is Steins Gate about? Well, it follows a delusional college student who fancies himself a mad scientist running a future gadgets lab. It starts off pretty innocently with a group of friends just hanging out, playing around with technology to see if they can discover time travel. That is, until they actually do and everything spirals out of control. And I'll be honest here, Steins Gate popularity surprises me a bit. For a community that has a strict 3-episode rule, I don't think Steins Gate would typically pass that test. The first episode starts off good, our protagonist stumbles upon a murder and we get hints of time travel shenanigans, but the next few episodes don't give us much direction. Instead, they just pile on more questions. Here's a sample of the questions that we're left with by episode 3. Is the main character totally delusional? Was the redhead girl even murdered, or is she immortal? What's the deal with the crashed satellite? Why is the quiet girl looking for an old computer? Is the time traveler on the internet forums legit? And what do those slimy bananas taste like? It's not that these mysteries aren't intriguing, but with no clear action or goal, it's hard to invest in what's happening. It wouldn't be the first anime to dish out plot threads that it couldn't follow up on. So I think Steins Gate's reputation carries viewers through its early phases because while the characters are charming enough, we still need some reassurance that it'll deliver. And deliver it does, but until the halfway mark, we're mostly just hanging out with the characters and experimenting with time travel, which still works well because the banter and chemistry between the characters is so enjoyable to watch. I think our protagonist sums up the situation quite well in episode 10 when he says, "I made this lab because I couldn't invent friends." So that's right, Steins Gate is about the power of friendship. When the fun and games end and the real plot kicks in, Steins Gate truly begins to shine. All that investment in the characters' relationships start to pay off, hitting you with one emotional gut punch after another as they then try to set things right. By the end, everything culminates in one of the most satisfying endings that anime has to offer. Then the series is followed by an anime original movie that creates its own problem for the characters to solve, but it doesn't feel quite in line with the original. It's not a bad thing, but it just shows how tightly wrapped up the original story was. And once again, it's the character's charm that really carries it. But that's not to say that a sequel can't be done, because there was something missing that the less talked about sequel Steins Gate Zero delivers on. Steins Gate Zero closes off one of the remaining plot threads, and in doing so, it has the unintentional advantage of having a clear direction from the beginning, since we know it's headed to tie into Steins Gate's ending. Where it shines is in taking the main cast from the original and giving them a logical progression for all of their story arcs, resulting in a higher emotional impact. I mean, I never thought I'd get so worked up over a guy going on an insane tirade and signing off with the words,
Psy Kongroo.
That's not to say that it's perfect. Not all the new characters get as fleshed out as the original cast, and the ending doesn't quite hit the same levels of satisfaction. Additionally, there's some moments that stretch the viewer's disbelief, like a teenage girl beating a whole army squad alone. I know there's time travel in this universe, but somehow that felt like the most unbelievable part. So far, I've focused a lot on Steins Gate because it's the most successful entry in the science adventure series. And as you might have gleaned, I attribute a lot of its success to the characters. However, having a large cast where each character gets some development isn't unique to Steins Gate. It's actually a reoccurring theme in the franchise, probably stemming from the fact that they're all originally visual novels. So we can see this starting all the way back from the franchise's first entry, Chaos Head. For some context, in Chaos Head, mysterious murders are occurring around the city while we follow our main character, Takumi, who is the epitome of an otaku stereotype. He's a shut-in who tries to avoid going to school, is obsessed with video games, anime, his favorite waifu, and perhaps most importantly, he suffers from severe delusions. Yet despite his antisocial tendencies, he somehow attracts a group of girls, each with their own tragic backstory. It feels like a very typical visual novel setup. The anime even starts with vague, cryptic dialogue, and then out of nowhere a random high school girl appears with a weapon and kisses our protagonist. But unlike Steins Gate, where the characters and their interactions are engaging, here they're often very awkward, with the interactions feeling forced and contrived. The series cycles through each of its female characters, dedicating a few episodes to each one while pushing the main plot forward, which is fine, but it leaves each of the girls feeling a bit one-dimensional. It's not as if the anime was trying to avoid disappointing fans by giving each character the minimal amount of screen time. Additionally, it doesn't help that Takumi isn't exactly likable. He's deeply flawed and not someone you naturally root for. So while I wouldn't say the characters are great, the plot still managed to hook me, largely because of Takumi's constant hallucinations that make you question what's real and what's not. The series really leans into this concept to the point where delusions become sort of a battle system, which is a unique twist, honestly. I found these psychological elements of the story to be genuinely interesting. It's worth noting that while Steins Gate got 24 episodes to handle its story, Chaos Head had to make do with only 12. That's not to say that I think the characters being a bit flat or a matter of them not having enough time to flesh out the characters, because, for example, Robotic Notes with its 22 episodes had plenty of time to develop its characters, and while they do get fleshed out, they're nowhere near as engaging. Robotic Notes follows two main characters, a boy and a girl with fictional health conditions as they try to build a giant robot. Well, she's trying to build it. The male lead's only real passion is playing a PvP mecha video game. And this game ties into the in-universe mecha anime that mysteriously never aired its final episode. Eventually, he discovers an AI girl in augmented reality created by some deceased scientist who may have predicted the future, hinting at conspiracies and government cover-ups. To Robotics Note's credit, it probably has the best setup of the entire franchise. We have a clear goal from the beginning, trying to build a robot. And from the first scene, we know it's just a matter of time. Which is actually a science adventure trope in itself, where the scene early on is looped back to later on. However, Robotic Notes takes far too long to go anywhere, often feeling like it's moving around in circles rather than heading straight to its destination. Which wouldn't be a problem if the characters weren't so tough to connect with. The male lead, for instance, seems to only care about his dumb game, so his passive attitude makes it hard for me to invest in anything that's going on. Plus, some of the character quirks feel like forced and unnatural, like one guy randomly starts speaking like a child, or the game dev who speaks almost exclusively in internet acronyms.
IMHO.
Contrast that to Steins Gate, where the internet references are sprinkled in naturally. Here they feel more like gimmicks rather than natural personality traits. Furthermore, Robotic Notes has the most blatant example of a reoccurring science adventure series tropes, where a character close to the protagonist is connected in some way to the antagonist. Almost every entry has some variation of this, and it makes sense. You don't want the main villain appearing out of nowhere. But here it's too obvious from the start. The main female lead sister isn't just connected to some mysterious robotics company, but she has some unexplained grudge against her little sister, making her future role a bit obvious. However, her position does hint at some hidden agenda that extends far beyond family drama or robotics. Because true to form, the science adventure series loves a good conspiracy. Conspiracy theories are rampant in this franchise, Chaos Head had the infamous 4G towers, Steins introduces CERN, Robotic Notes takes on magnetic fields and solar flares, and perhaps most interestingly, Occultic 9 delves into, well, the occult. Occultic 9 is unique as it's the only entry of the franchise based on a light novel. Its main character is a blogger who spends his days debunking the occult on his website until he's forced to confront life's biggest question. Can you make money online? And more pressingly, could the supernatural be real? He's joined by an eccentric cast, from a fortune teller to a detective to a girl wielding a laser gun. There's 9 of them, I think you get the picture. The series by far has the most creative artistic direction, suddenly shifting the camera 90 degrees or tilting into Dutch angles to make the scenes feel more disorienting, eerie, and tense. This style amplifies the mystery and conspiracy themes, giving Occultic 9 the most atmosphere compared to the rest of the franchise. The first episode even ends with our blogger stumbling upon a well-foreshadowed murder, setting off a chain of events that get darker with every turn. And if you've been paying attention, you might notice that every single science adventure entry that I've covered so far has some connection to a murder mystery. These shared threads show just how much common DNA the franchise has. You can even find smaller details, like each protagonist having a favorite drink or snack. And even more fascinating is that each series includes some form of in-universe collectible. In Chaos Head, it's the Froggy Boy keychains, Steins has its round Oompas, Robotic Notes has the in-game mecha characters, and Occultic 9 features collectible cards. These aren't just random items, they're subtle nods to the visual novel culture. Just as each character is obsessed with collecting rare items, visual novel otaku often replay scenes to collect all the endings to unravel every possible story path. It's symbolic, it's meta, and it's something I completely made up to lead into the only entry that I haven't covered yet, Chaos Child. Because watching Chaos Child almost feels like watching a parody of the science adventure series. It takes every trope that I've mentioned and dials it up to 11. But first, what is Chaos Child about? Set a few years after the events of Chaos Head, it follows a new protagonist and his high school newspaper club, as they investigate a string of gruesome murders, and disturbingly, as they dig deeper, it starts to feel like the murders are following them rather than the other way around. For those familiar with the franchise, Chaos Child is both a nod and a wink to all the tropes it's built up over the years. What do I mean by that? Remember how I said that every character gets some development and significance in the story? Well, here we meet a blue-haired girl who has nothing to do with anything. She doesn't even have a single line of dialogue. Looking for murder mystery? Well, we have plenty of gruesome murders here, all stuffed into neat little boxes. And the classic trope of someone close to the protagonist being close to the antagonist? Well, it doesn't get more comical than your adoptive father being the bad guy. Oddly enough, this self-aware, tongue-in-cheek nod to the franchise's tropes works. So much so that when I watched the Chaos Child sequel movie, I was caught completely off guard. The movie recontextualizes the entire series, making all the strange takes on the usual tropes actually click perfectly into place. Part of the fun of watching this franchise is piecing everything together as it unfolds. Each entry interlinks its characters and plot with such care that if you're paying enough attention, you can actually catch hints before they're actually revealed. And if you watch in release order, there's this subtle misdirection that each series might be building off the previous one. For example, when Steins opens with its main character who seems a bit delusional, you have to wonder if it's following in Chaos Head's footsteps. Then when you start Robotic Notes, that cryptic message at the end of episode 1 hints at future events, making you wonder if time travel is involved. Now that we've looked at all the series and explored the reoccurring tropes, it's time for the main event that you've been waiting for. It's time to answer the question, what happens if all the science adventure series titles step into the ring and duke it out? Who comes out on top in my ranking of the science adventure series? Each series brings something unique to the table, but there's one that stands out, or maybe stumbles, at the very bottom of my list. You might have guessed it, but my least favorite is Robotic Notes. For some reason, the story just didn't click with me. Maybe it's the localization. I watched all of these series with an English dub, but I found it hard to connect with these characters, making it a bit of a slog. Which is unfortunate because Robotic Notes seems to be positively reviewed by others, so maybe it's just a me thing. but as it stands, I'm giving Robotic Notes a rating of 1 monopole falling from the sky. Next up is Chaos Child, and while I might have sounded a bit harsh earlier, I actually think it's pretty fun. It smartly focuses on developing a smaller portion of its cast, which helps given its runtime. The return to the theme of delusions is a nice callback, but it doesn't pull it off as well as its predecessor. The tension is just not the same, since you can instantly tell when something is a delusion because the screen gets this red filter, so you just know it's not real. In Chaos Head, on the other hand, you're never too sure when something is real or not until after the fact. Still, Chaos Child gets a rating of 1 two-faced sumo sticker. Following that is the aforementioned Chaos Head. Along with Steins Gate, it's probably the most drenched in otaku culture. Chaos Head can be confusing, even repulsing at times, but for me that's part of the charm. It pulls you in with its intense psychological dive, where the line between reality and delusion is constantly shifting. With the story revolving around delusions, there's a natural build-up to a climax that feels like a choice between reality and madness, kind of reminiscent of Evangelion. Heck, Takumi has trouble communicating with people and is kind of a reluctant protagonist, much like Shinji. Anyway, I'm giving Chaos Head a rating of 1 cargo container on a rooftop that you can call home. Runner-up goes to Occultic 9. From its interesting visuals and quirky cast, this one is just fun. I think it's the only entry that, if we had more time with the characters, it could have been a cult classic. An occultic classic, you could say. Eh? That said though, it's a bit fast-paced and the only entry whose ending doesn't completely close off all of its plot threads. It's also worth noting that despite not being adapted from a visual novel, it feels like the most horny of the bunch. I'm giving Occultic 9 a rating of 1 plot-relevant laser gun. Finally, we're at the top, with the duo of Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero. It's almost impossible to beat these two. The characters all feel real, like people you could actually know, and the otaku elements are woven in without feeling too off-putting. But which one is superior? Obviously, Steins Gate Zero doesn't work without the existence of the original, but Steins Gate Zero has a much more emotional character journey, while the original offers a more satisfying and complete ending. It's a toss-up for what you prefer, and a hard choice for me until I remembered that Steins Gate Zero has a scene featuring one of my least favorite tropes in anime, a female character getting groped against her will. So while Steins Gate Zero nearly takes the crown, it falls short. Steins Gate Zero gets a rating of 1 AI girlfriend, while the original Steins Gate receives the coveted rating of 1 pocket watch that has been taken extra good care of. So that is my final ranking, and just for some quick fun, here is how I would rank each opening of the series against each other, and here is how I'd rank the ending themes as well. When I first looked into watching the science adventure series anime, the most common advice I came across online was simple: don't. The common sentiment is that the visual novels are a much better experience, arguing that the anime adaptations are far too condensed, fast-paced, and lose much of the charm that make the stories shine. And while I can't speak to the visual novels personally, I'm sure there's some truth to that. However, if visual novels aren't your thing, I don't see why you still can't enjoy these stories in their anime format. My personal experience with the anime adaptations was generally positive. That said, it's easy to see why Steins Gate's adaptation stands above the rest. It truly is a full package. From its unforgettable, quirky characters to its gripping drama mid-series and its deeply satisfying ending that ties everything together, Steins Gate excels on almost every front. The aforementioned reoccurring tropes range from being executed well to spectacularly. So, to answer my initial question, is Steins Gate genuinely that good? Honestly, yes. Now, is it the best anime of all time? Maybe not. But it certainly earns all the love and praise that it gets. And I hope this video helps shed a light on the other entries in the Science Adventure series, because while Steins Gate might be the crown jewel, the rest of the series have their own unique charm and interesting ideas to offer. If you loved Steins Gate, you might find glimmers of that brilliance scattered throughout the others. And with that, we've reached the end of this video. I hope you had a good time watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Whether it's about Steins Gate, the Science Adventure series, or just to tell me that I'm completely delusional. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you whenever.